Alrighty, everybody. Hello, welcome to the Starlight Haven. This is our Songs of Mu segment where we just go ahead and we tune in and we discuss different aspects of the grid that are coming up related to Mu. And right now, what I was tuning into was the Mediterranean Sea and the water temples that were opening up for us. And this is a whole ordeal that involves not only our oceans, but it also involves our river systems. And the ones that I'm tuning into specifically will be from the Mediterranean to North and South Atlantic. And one side we will be heading into Leeds, and in the other side we'll be touching down through Africa as well as Yemen and Australia. And we aren't going to be discussing so much of Australia as we are a concept that is coming in from Australia that is really beautiful and deeply, deeply related to what we will be connecting into. So this video will be all about water. And so this was something that I channeled live, and I'm relaying the messages to you through like a little bit of a summarization. So this video is a summary of that live channel. We started this channel by connecting in with the Mediterranean Sea and the Goddess Oshun from the Yoruba religion/culture, and she came in to basically ignite this vision of these underwater temples that were here for us to witness and to see. And so she was showing these opalescent water temples and these giants that were acting as guardians of these water temples, who were holding the frequency of reverence while humanity was getting ready to go ahead and connect to these temples once more. And so my guide, Emery, who is the frequency and energy of a moldavite crystal, came in to connect us to the crystalline networks and the grid that was here. And she introduced us to these core themes that needed to be released within humanity. And a lot of this was manifesting as dollars, like money, in the energy of capsizing. So we're talking about the ocean. And so when we think about capsizing, we think about a boat that's flipping over, sinking, the energy of jealousy, enemies, locusts, starvation, lack, separation from true self. And so there is an energy here of, separation from self and separation from God. And so when you have these frequencies happening here, they're using our emotions because we are so deeply connected to the water. So the watery frequency of our emotions is being harvested and loosed in this area, which you could kind of see as more of like a dense film that was over these temples. So this dense film that we are experiencing is actually on its way to being cleared out as we learn to stabilize our emotions in our body. And that's part of what Oshun helps us do, is she helps stabilize our emotions and bring balance to our emotional body. And so that's why she showed up here, to help support us and help us navigate the rivers of our emotions that exist within our body. And yeah, so the big messages here in the Mediterranean was bringing reverence back for the self, for the waters, for the oceanic temples beneath the Mediterranean. And our connection was being reestablished through our feet to these temples, through our plantar, and the plantar aspect of our foot. And this represented regaining balance and no longer treading water. So it's an invitation of our original Templar seedlings and water consciousness. So to connect with this is the invitation, and expanding awareness beyond the oceans into the rivers, the lakes, and the wells, all unified as one consciousness. So, something that I want to keep in mind because we aren't going to directly be going into Australia necessarily here, but the frequency is held throughout this whole channel. And it's a word called AKUNA. And it is a word that is of Indigenous Australian origin. And it means flowing water or to know and to flow. And so it's kind of that same like cross-cultural sentiment of knowing the way and using the waters to show us the way, knowing that to some degree we are the waters and we are the way we know, and it exists within our memory of this water consciousness. Okay, and so what we do next is we will head into Yemen, and I will show you guys the map here. Our starting point was here at the Mediterranean, and then we head into the Strait of Gibraltar, into the Atlantic Ocean, where we're going to actually split off into the South Atlantic and follow that into the Cape of Good Hope, the Indian Ocean, and then into Yemen, which lies here in the Gulf of Aden. And so, like I said, we're not really actually going to end up in Australia, just keeping Akuna in mind as we go ahead and we look at Yemen and discuss what's coming in from here, that's carrying this water consciousness from the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so we are back. So, Yemen brings the memory of sand and what sand carries as a memory. And so, Yemen was acting as a transmission between our connection between land and sea. And so, Yemen has these really, really beautiful sand dunes that are like gorgeous. They also have, a crazy amount of um vultures that eat away the dead energy. And then they also have these beautiful dragon blood trees. And so when I first connected with Yemen, we had done a grid session related to the dragon blood tree. And my grid sessions had been very focused on the tree network. And so in this one specifically, we were talking about the different stories related to Genesis. And we have a lot of different stories in the Bible, but the one related to Cain and Abel and how one brother against another, and the blood from that tree was the blood from the brother, and that tree grew from that blood. And so there was a healing that was happening with that tree. After we had connected with that, we were also connecting into these caves that were dwellings, and I could feel a cave connected to the bridal chamber of Sophia. And so these energies are something that are going to, stay with us as we go into the rest of our water consciousness, because one thing led to another, right? And now we're here. But I do want to talk about the sand dunes because they are memory keepers. They are representative of us in a way. And each small granule holds an oceanic memory, and it signals moving between water and land, and that we're always connected to it, and that we always have been. And I had this really beautiful vision of people who were in these boats on a river in Africa, and I could see them jumping into the rivers and holding the memory of breathing underwater and connecting with ocean, connecting with these temples. And so part of what exists in this land is that memory of connection to our own lungs and our breathing. And yeah, and so I will connect more into what that means in a second, because there's this really interesting part here about how we have to connect into what my guides were calling a respirator, to restore that memory of breathing on both land and sea, that conjunction. And so we had a couple helpers coming in here. We had Pachamama energy that was grounding everything into one whole. Saffron, who wanted to bring in kindness as a healing memory. So the memory of kindness as something that could heal us. And this contrasted with the artificial memory of destruction and cataclysm that we have faced on this earth. So, a big part of us healing this genetic component. So, it's kind of like in my last video, I was talking about how certain genes were shut off for our that we shut them off for our own protection. So we were dying of diseases, we were facing starvation, we were facing this energy of the locust and not having enough to feed ourselves. We were dying of heat stroke, we were freezing to death. There were all of these things that made the earth feel uninhabitable. So there was a certain amount of genetic coding that we shut off. That memory was replaced by artificial memory of destruction and cataclysm. And so now we're at a point of reawakening the memory of coastal remnants that we once had lost, or we had thought was lost, but it was always held in our cells, in our bones, and our DNA. And so that's something that we are recovering at this moment in time through our connection with these water temples in the Mediterranean, as well as these gene pools that exist within Leeds, UK, which is another thing that we had seen on our map. We're going to head into this concept of the respirator and this artificial breathing, not being able to breathe, not being able to breathe deep enough, not being able to connect to our life force, not being able to receive mana from mother. And so these are energies that are repairing as we release this respirator. And we do this by connecting to Shakti and we breathe. It allows the well of emotions to come up and be really truly felt and to help balance that, but it also acts as a mediator of the body's own unique water system, because our body also has its own river system through our blood and our plasma, through our organs. All of these aspects are our inner waters. And so we are releasing these black magic grids that are essentially creating this feeling of not being able to breathe. And the oceanic particles that rise up from the Mediterranean, from Yemen, from any of the ocean that you're near, because they're all connected. When those particles are rising up in the air and you're breathing in that ocean air, it's restoring your lungs. Those particles contain memory as well, and they give us direct access to these Yemen dunes. And part of that memory is the Lunarian principle of heaven above, heaven below, and heaven within. And so that brings us to the feminine principle, which is letting go of having to rewind, of having to jump forward, restoring the ability to be present at all moments in time, and embodying the feminine principle, and in that presence, being aware of the bodily temple and its connection to the inner temples, and our connection to the inner temples that mirror the underwater ones that we are reconnecting with. And so we have been going through a process for the last couple years of restoring our true stem cells, because we didn't have access to all of them and they weren't up to their actual full potential of rebuilding the body. And now they are there. And so we have a lot of energy hotspots that are tied to the stem cells. Okay, I'm feeling this as like a liquidation of the body. So the stem cells are doing something with like rebuilding the body in a way of like releasing these, like, it comes from the term Mundi, which generally means like of this world. And so when we have that conceptualization, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but that also stores a lot of negative energy into our body cells and memory. And so, like, the memory that's held in our cells will have these memories of, like, I'm of this world. So I'm of disease, I'm of famine, I'm of, starvation. But there are many other things of this world. And so, what happens is when we restore our genetic templating that knows its connection to the mother and the father and knows its connection to unity and oneness, we become that, right? So, that Monday becomes I am of myself, I am of the universe, and I am of connection and unity. I'm of restoration. And so that allows the body to restore itself to the place that it longs to be. And so that is happening right now within our stem cells. So we will have energy hotspots where we will really feel that in the body. And I feel these tied to the land also, because we are also helping release some narrative that's stored within the earth related to what's also stored in our stem cells. Then we are receiving a Lemurian memory activation of our T cells, specifically of and I'm still unraveling this because I do a lot of cellular work. So the T cells specifically, what we know of them is that they help, fight off disease and virus and different things like that. And so we were connecting into this Lemurian memory of our T cells and releasing the idea that these Lemurian aspects of ourselves wanted to burst out, like they needed to explode out of us, when really it is a very gentle experience. It's slowly reminding us. And so, with our T cells, what this would create if it was an expressive burst out is more autoimmune disorder. And our body needs to feel safe enough to start taking these memories and reactivating them. If it doesn't feel safe doing that, then we have more of an influx of these autoimmune diseases coming up because the body will be like, this isn't safe for us to have. And so the T cells are actually providing us some of that memory as well of like, hey, like this is what our T cells were like here during this time, and it's okay that we slowly integrate them back into the body. That way we don't feel like we're in danger. We feel safety, and that's kind of the way, like that is like the flow. We allow it to flow, we allow simplicity. We don't have to engage it all at once and feel like it needs to all be activated because we're running out of time. Whatever I was feeling that was existing here. But it's a gentle experience. It's like it's tapping us on the shoulder saying, hey, I'm here. Remember me? Together we are here, and we are seeding, slowly growing into this big tree. And then it was showing that these T cells were actually also reminding us of its own structure of relating to a tree, and how as it grows and reminds us of these memories, it shows us that we are more than one thing, and it can be encased in this human body safely. Whether you're someone who has different galactic, genetic code related to um Syria, the Syrians, Lyrans, um, Palladian, all of these different things that you can name off, we must remember that we are housing this in this human body, and the human body is being restored so it can house these things in a safe way. But they all accumulate to oneness of who we are. So we don't forget the human aspect of us. It is the most important aspect of us. It's because it's who we are now in the present. And we're remembering what that actually means. And we're defining what that means for ourselves. knowing that all definitions can be null and void. The things that you've defined yourself as because of other people, people who have placed their own distortions on you, you don't have to carry those narratives, okay? And so my other guide named Matthew came in and he was speaking about um, these different shells that are on the shoreline. Matthew came in with this message about shells having been cleaned up. And it's like walking down the shoreline, searching for seashells, and having the impression that there's not enough for everybody. It's kind of like when you go on vacation and you're like, oh, I can't find the shells because somebody else took them all, or, whatever. If you can't find any shells, and you scoop up as many as you can find, and the idea that there isn't enough is an illusion. I mean, even this idea that, like, when shells are hitting rocks before they enter into the sand, that the sand itself carries so much of that oceanic memory of a living, breathing being that remembers the way, that remembers the ocean floor. And these shells come with these memories. And each one of us is like that seashell that has been through the ocean before, that has been housed in this like layer of of oceanic memory, and now we get to reactivate it and reawaken it by all of the shells that we have collected that are for us. And everybody has that. Everyone has that shell, and all of us have had different lifetimes where we have ocean memory and water memory. Could be rivers too, not just ocean, but like we have that water memory, and we allow it to become this like guiding principle for us. We allow it to restore our memory, and we allow ourselves to become oceanfront, to witness the tides that are pulling in and leaving again, and how that really is so similar to our experience here on this earth. We come and we go, and even the tides, that they change, and that we're at a place of the tides are changing, they're shifting, and all of the shells have come up to the surface. We found them, we're collecting them, they're cleaned up, we've looked at them, and now we restore what is true for us through these memories. This comes with the clearing of this idea that things are bigger than what we can control, that things have snowballed so greatly that there's no way that things can shift, that the tides can't change. And that simply isn't true. That is also an illusion. Things can change, things are shifting, and they happen within us first. They start with us in our memories and the restoration of our memory. And we're going to even go back into the energy of the mother, because, like I said, this video was supposed to come first. So it's kind of funny. I actually think, chronologically, it makes sense that my Feminine Christ video came first. And if you go ahead, you can go onto my channel and you can receive that healing of the umbilicus and the sutures in our skull. And what that's going to do is make this aspect make a lot more sense, because here we are receiving the memory as we clean up the illusions. We receive the memory of the mother and how the mother works, and that the mother has enough for all of her children. She can pay attention to each one, and it's not more than she can handle. And so when we look at that and we take that information and we look at what's going on in the world, and we're like, this is bigger than what we can handle, but the mother can handle it. And so we need to trust in the mother. I've chosen to focus on the mother in this case because she has been so present in this oceanic memory and restoring it, and making sure that her children know that she has enough for them. And we can see this within ourselves. When we connect to her, we have the ability to hold space for ourselves. It grants us the time and reverence to pay attention to what is happening within us when everything else is so loud. And it doesn't mean that we aren't being helpful. We're making sure that we are able to sustain our own energy field before we can really support other people. And that really has to do with us also healing a lot of these savior constructs that are on the planet. What came through next was community and emotional expression. And they were talking to me about Elohim and how our emotions are actually a gift from our Elohim templating, and they help us develop our true speech without making us feel like our speech is too much, that our emotions are too much, that it makes it harder for us to speak up when we feel like our emotions are too much, that we are unable to express our emotions without criticism. And so, what happens when that emotion compiles up is it creates like a ginormous release of it in a way that isn't really embodied, and it kind of, it's like the river overflowed, it's what we do is we flow, right? We flow, we allow the AKUNA to take over, and allow AKUNA to be the guiding principle of, that water flowing through our body in a way that's sustainable. And that's certainly not our fault, because our society has taught us to suppress emotion, to suppress this aspect of our templating, and that is something that we are healing right now. And this is going to help us generate our true speech without the chatter of the mind. And so we learn to express ourselves, and we're using emotion in conjunction with deeply feeling within the body and allowing our voice to restore us and return us home. And these things are what make us the seeders of new realities, of new dreams. They make us cheerful, they make us smile, and they bring us joy, and they help us play because we feel safe to express ourselves so fully and wholly. And that's something that needs to be built from the inside, from the ground up. Sometimes it needs to be restored, and it can be hard, but we can do it. And when we're connected to the mother again through our umbilicus in our heart, we can feel the safety to do so. And then we were connecting in here also to the ear of the horse. And this goes back to my other video where we were talking about the warrior code, the true warrior code. And I really feel that connected to the year of the horse and the restoration of the warrior code within humanity. And I was seeing the horse's mane, the hair, and how the strands were untamed. And I could feel this connected to a healing related to the Nefertiti bloodline. And so with Nefertiti, it's interesting because I want to take a second to look at what was happening during her reign. I know it wasn't hers specifically, it was her husband's, but like she was very prominent during that time. So I want to look at what was happening with her. And a lot of the time I'll post a picture up here for of it, but you could see her. She drove her own chariot. So she was, you know, driving the horse. She was the one that was in these positions of war. And that image is something that I want to keep in the back of our mind as this bloodline is healing, because there's something with that and the true warrior that doesn't align, especially with the feminine. A lot of this is feeling like mangled, entangled with war consciousness, being disconnected from the feminine, from the matriarch and the true matriarch, the true warrior that exists within all women. And so there's something within us that is very untamed, that is wild, that we should be left untangled, or, not tangled. We should be left free and untamed. and, our hair blowing in the wind with wildness, and knowing that we are safe to always be helped by our families of light. And with the Nefertiti bloodline, if you look at the art, so there was a lot of art that existed that showed a lot of prosperity, but when these different archaeologists went back and they looked at the commoners' cemetery, we saw that people were malnourished, they were starving, even though this was supposed to be a time of prosperity. People weren't growing, children weren't growing, which is a sign of child labor. And so we have to really look at that in conjunction to what is happening on the earth right now, and how the mother can be misused and distorted in some way, and to allow that bloodline to heal in this moment, because that is what is deeply coming through here in this channel with the Year of the Horse. We are burning through that healing. And so, yeah, and with that, we're also feeling a shift here. And we had a memory from our spirit team, or we had a message from our spirit team that they wanted to leave with us, that the energy is shifting. They were saying that the helpers are home, they're here, they've returned to the planet, and that we have to look at stories that are yelled rather than spoken. They have to be so loud, they have to be projected because their frequency is so low. And so us at our true speech, we're functioning at a higher frequency than the speech that you're hearing in media, telling you to be afraid, telling you to have no hope, telling you about war and famine and starvation, and telling you that you're not enough. These have to be yelled because their frequency is so low. And so as you shift and you change and you heal these different things, you start to see that this frequency of untamed speech, of being wild and free, is a lot different than yelling. um, it's like yelling. This yelling is not a battle cry. Ours is. That true speech is a battle cry for humanity. And its narratives, its story, and its plot, they will no longer fit our narrative anymore. Our true story, we are being told to believe something that we did not agree to. We didn't agree to these stories and narratives, they just are. We were born, and they were like, these are your stories, these are your narratives, this is what you can be when you grow up, this is what you can learn in school, this is what, you know, gets you accepted by society, this is it, right? And this is what you can believe, this is the political spectrum that you can be on. All of these things that really were imposed on us, to fit like a good versus evil narrative, to put us in drama triangles with other people, to take us out of union, to put us into separation. We've become accustomed to it, to that lower frequency. And so when we really challenge the status quo, we are shifting into that octave of wild and untamed energy, that higher frequency of speech. We become our true narrator. And so our helpers are here to support that by helping us change the plot, helping us remember. And that's how we change that plot. That there is more than what we are being yelled to believe, and that we have the courage to experience the true frequency of speech, a vocalization of the power of our voice, and it helps diminish the underlying layer of fabrication of untruths, and we are no longer entangled in a web. So that was the message they really wanted to kind of leave us with. And then they wanted to remind us that the helpers that we are with, they they're not just unbelievable things. If you're watching this video somehow and you've stuck around this long and you're like, oh, what are helpers? Like, the dragons and the fairies and like all of these different energies, these ancient energies that are coming to the surface right now. um yes, there are those, but they also don't have to be things that are unbelievable. Helpers are the clovers that grow in our grass. The helpers are nature. They're the trees, they're the wind, the waters, the sun, the moon, the ponds, the rivers, the streams, and the purity that exists within nature, that purity and that innocence reflects back to us, to ourselves. So we remember how pure we are, because a lot of these narratives are to shame us into not speaking. We don't have to earn acceptance. We are loved inherently, and that's something that the mother is also teaching us. And so we are going to be moving on to the widening of the gene pool, because that's where this all kind of is going to end up. And like I said, we didn't feel like we could trust being here. And there is an underlying belief system here that this would come with a cost if we widen the gene pool, that we would have to spend to receive, and that pool is widening for us. And a lot of this has to come down to survival. So that cost could be death, it could be famine, it could be, us being ill. And so that's why those genes were shut off, because we didn't feel safe to receive them. And some of these genes will trigger memories of warfare, of something as simple as, the land, feeling like the land bit us back in a way that felt unsupportive. This genetic pool was never, ever, ever out to harm us. This genetic pool is our birthright. It's part of our ability to connect with this planet, to receive. And so if we are constantly, if we think like, oh, we associate, for example, receiving with punishment, and that is not the genetic fault. That is more of something that was manufactured, and that's part of that artificial memory. And these are things that, like, yes, happened and are happening now, right? Like we see that with our water right now, even though water is so important, how so much of that water usage is just like going to waste, that it's illegal to, in some areas, even dig our own well. Like these are things that we have to look at, that are like telling us that there is not enough, and that if we do attempt to have enough, like say you do dig a well and there's a repercussion for it. And so to protect ourselves, there was a closing of the door of our genetic code, and now the door is open and we're allowed to dip back in because it's our birthright. We get to choose that. And that comes with a lot of releasing of distortion within the field of our genes. And so that leads us into Leeds. Okay, here's our little map again. We are heading into the Mediterranean once more, to the Strait of Gibraltar again, into the Atlantic Ocean, into the North Sea, where we will follow this whole line into Leeds. So we had two areas that we were branching off into. And so, as we bring up Leeds, this is our last bit of information here. The access point to this gene pool specifically is in Leeds. And so there are multiple, but this is one of the access points in Leeds. And it's not about it, it's not like its own technology or anything, but it is an access point of these logs that have our genetic templating in them. And so different languages are stored here, different ways to move forward, to redirect the present. And there may have been times where we thought we were too late, but we are right on time. And that's what this gene pool transmits to us. And these are definitely connected to the Mediterranean Sea and our own oceanic memory here. And when you connect to this gene pool in Leeds, and you can do this as well on your own, there is a connection here to Sirius, and this connection to England, and there's a dog collective here in England that is helping protect and restore this genetic pool, and they're guardians of this temple. And so it wasn't just this temple specifically that they were guardians of. I could also see them guardians of these moon temples that were water temples as well. And they were holding this like frequency of guardianship here. And there is nothing keeping us away from these temples. They're here. It's accessible, and they are being accessed on a daily basis. if we choose whether or not we want that information. And like I said, it's always our choice. When we access this gene pool, we are reminded here, and this was our final message, that Lemuria is here on Earth in its own way, helping through our shared memory that we are accessing through this genetic pool, and that through this pool, we heal something that we are experiencing on the planet right now, which is starvation, so deeply. And, we're going to see it through different ways. A lot of this is chosen starvation. It's an insatiable hunger that many of us are feeling at this moment. It's like there's a new wave of starvation happening. It feels like a force, but it's also chosen starvation through the pushing of different weight loss medications. These are things that are being opted into. Debt is one of them. It manifests in a lot of ways, and that hunger is something that is asking to be seen and not suppressed. And what's interesting about a lot of these weight loss medications is that they disconnect us from our own body, telling us that it's hungry, that it needs something. And it's not necessarily just like the food is part of that. Part of that is the food, it's the sustenance, but it's also the mana that comes from the mother. It's our connection to our genetics that we long to connect to that can heal this starvation. And so I think it's worth mentioning an interesting parallel that we have such an influx of the push of a medication that will essentially suppress your hormones so you don't feel hunger when the hunger wants to be heard. When we connect to these pools, we're connecting to the energy of satiation, of not being hungry anymore, of remembering and restoring our right to be fed, to be nourished. This body is our home and we belong here, right? We should never be told that we don't belong here. We shouldn't be punished for being here. And we don't have to be starved out of our homes. And that is something that has also played out on the world stage many, many times through many different ways. Famine is one of them. And that's why we're forced labor that happened during, Nefertiti's time in Egypt, where their workers weren't fed enough, even though the elites were nice and filled. We also deserve to be satiated, to be filled, and we get to choose that. And I was feeling a lot of purification of famine that was coming in through the Mediterranean as well. And it's an access point of just taking that out of our system, as we feel that deep hunger, and allowing ourselves to be fed and to be nourished. And then just like that, we've accepted that into our lives and we're fed. And so that's where we're working toward. And they were closing with this image of us being free, like baby mares just running, being fiery, unbridled. And that energy was weaving into the energy that is wild, that exists on the planet, allowing ourselves to become untethered, to be wild, running free, playful, knowing that the mother is here helping and father is also here helping, and we get to explore and become even more wild and more untamed in the embrace of mom and dad. And that we aren't here to serve other people's agenda that is negative. That we're not here to be groomed and living in servitude. We're connecting into the energy of neem here as well. And when I think of neem, I think of how it gets rid of the bugs on my plants, and so I think about how it can help restore us as well. And even as these different monsters come up, because we're like little kids, right, in this imagery, we know that they aren't always what they seem, that we can release the energy of feeling spooked out, of being scared of our own natural vibration, and that releasing that fear is what helps release a lot of these negative energies that we feel on the planet, that our own vibration is no longer going to be foreign to us. that we don't have to push it away, that we know who we are, and no longer allowing ourselves to be lassoed and to be reined in. Freeing that hold around of our necks, allowing ourselves to speak again, for our head to be free. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you guys. I'm sending you so much love. Enjoy. Bye.